Python is a high level language, or we can say like general purpose programming language. Now, when we are actually talking about like programming language, then the question is, most of the time we end up calling like Python script. Let's say when I'm talking about like scripting languages, doesn't matter like what type of scripting it is. For example, shell scripting you are familiar with Perl, you can familiar with like maybe a little bit of a Python code you must have seen, Java scripting, VB scripting, and we talk about like scripting languages. Now here we are actually telling like Python is a high level programming language or general purpose programming language. So what is the difference between programming language versus scripting language? Anyone wants to answer?
Yeah, scripting language is run without interpreter, so you can run on console. But in a programming language, we have to compile it and run it. Another different is in a programming language we can use the oops method, means object oriented, and in a script we don't have that concept, right? Maybe I'm not covering up.
Programming language, say you have mentioned about like scripting language without interpreter. That statement is completely wrong. Without interpreter, nothing we can actually execute. Basically, look at cell programming. If you are actually familiar, heard about it, the first line of the cell programming, we are actually specifying the interpretation line or interpreter line, or we call it as a bang line. Similarly, for any scripting language, when we are talking about Python, we definitely need an interpreter, because who is going to interpret like the program basically in the runtime? And the second statement, whatever you have made, that is actually absolutely correct. Correct. We compile it and execute it. Most of the time, like in the programming languages, what we do, let's say for example, C programming language, Java, C++, what we do is, in case of like programming languages like C, Java, or C++, what we do is we do definitely compile it. First of all, we'll write the program, then the compilation is going to happen. Whenever we're actually compiling it, it will flag if there are any errors. If there are any errors in this program, let's say for example, syntax related error or anything, it will be flagged in the compilation time. Once the compilation is actually successful, then we can actually execute the program. Compilation is successful doesn't mean that there will be like no error. Definitely there will be error. What kind of errors we are going to expect? Definitely not syntax error, because syntax error will be actually taken care during the compilation. Then there are actually two types of other errors. One is like a runtime error or logical error. Let's something wrong with logic. Let's adding up two numbers. You are actually using the operator as actually minus. Then it's a logical error. Let's say, for example, you want to actually call a function, but you are a function one. Instead of function one, you are actually calling function two. That is not syntax error. That is actually logical error or something wrong with your business logic, and it will be flagged during the runtime. Let's say, for example, there are another kind of error like or exception. Let's say, for example, the value should be string, but we are actually passing the value as integer, or like now if the value should not be null, we are not passing anything, just hit enter, and then we can actually see there's something going wrong in the runtime. So those kind of errors are actually runtime errors. So guys, in short, like I'm not going to talk more about the history, but in short, I'm just going to tell you Python. We are actually using Python for programming, and as well as Python we can actually use for scripting languages. If you are actually familiar with like now object oriented features, let's say for example class, inheritance, constructors, like member functions, like many other things, we can definitely do each and everything. Let's say overriding, overloading, these are like now object oriented features available in many programming languages like C++, Java we do have, C sharp we have, like many of the programming languages that support like object oriented programming. And Python also supports the object oriented programming too. Who has actually developed the Python? Anybody knows about like who developed Python, or who like who discovered Python? No worry, I'm just going to tell you. Yes. So it is actually Van Rossum, or the complete name is actually Viola Van Rossum. He has developed the Python. The Python programming is there. I think 1990, 1991 time. No clue on Python. In 2006-7 time frame, I remember like MATLAB and Python was there. I got a like chance to work over there, but I did not like it, and then I just gave it up. Remember, guys, the Python initial version was actually 0.9, I believe, and then the official release version was actually 1.0. It was in 1991. Then the development continued. The development continued like around 2000 time frame. We got Python 2.x, and in 2020, 2020, Python 2.7.x was last released, and they have decided that Python 2.x should be discontinued. Like we are not going to use Python 2.x going forward. The next question is of Python, or you can actually Google it and see 1991, 1990, 1991 time frame, Python was actually developed like now first came to the market, and then in around 2000 time frame we got 2.x version. The most recent version of Python 2 is actually 2.7.x. I think 2.7.8 or 2.7.6, I forget like the subversion actually 2.7.x, I believe. Now the question is, right now we do have Python 3. The Python 3, the most recent version is actually 3.10. The 3.10 was last released, I think, last quarter of 2021. I think October last year, sometime 2021, the Python 3.10 came into picture. Then few minutes ago, a few seconds ago, I have actually told like Python 2.7 is the latest version and it is discontinued, but I'm talking about 3.10. That is quite interesting. Like I mentioned, it is discontinued in 2020. Now telling 3.10 came into picture in 2021. Guys, remember, Python 2.x or Python 2 and Python 3 are completely different. It is not like I've released a software with 1.x today, tomorrow it is 1.1, the same piece of code with some additional enhancements. Then 1.2 came into picture, then it is like 1.1 plus additional changes, some changes deprecated, some enhancements being done. So all these things we can actually do in Python. It is done in Python 2.2, sorry, 2.x. But whenever I'm talking about like 3.x, the Python 3 is completely new and it was not a copy pasted version of Python 2. Why? Because the language fundamentals, if you do like the Python 2 versus Python 3, just search in Google, you can actually find it out. N number of differences, which is not a copy pasted version of 2.x to 3.x. What they have done, like the scientists or the guys who are actually working along with like the founder of Python language, what they have done is they have identified there are like a lot of limitations in 2.x, starting from language fundamentals. The way the language is actually working in 2.x is completely not worthy, like because they are like related to performance issues, memory issues, the way it was actually implemented. It was like I'm just talking about like 30 years ago what was being done. Okay, 30 years ago something was done, and we should not actually continue in that way. We should actually definitely reinvent and modify according to current needs, what we can actually foresee. Let's just think about in 1990s, even in 2000, nobody was actually exploring the artificial intelligence and machine learning. But in 2020, 2022, we are only focused on artificial intelligence, machine learning, data analytics, data science, and all these things. So all these features, considering all these features, like whatever the limitations were there in 2.x, it was completely addressed in Python 3.x. So Python 3.0 came into picture around 2008, I believe, and the most recent version of Python 3.x is actually 3.10, which was actually released last year. Now the question would be, should I learn Python 2 or Python 3? Guys, remember, I'm just going to cover only Python 3.x. Why? Because the future, we are learning Python right now. Think about when you have actually done your engineering or like a master's in computer science or some other technologies, you may not have actually more focused on Python then. Maybe some language you pick it up, C, C++, Java, and then computer science guys and IT guys, and then learn it, complete it, then you are done with your examination. Then once you're actually done with that, you'll just keep forgetting. If you are not implementing that, you'll just definitely keep forgetting, right? So now, whenever we are actually going to learn Python, like now we are learning in 2022. Definitely, we are not going to learn about Python 2 at this moment. There is definitely you can maintain. Believe me, you can able to maintain the code which is written in Python 2. There'll be differences, little bit differences, but I'll encourage if you are actually going to develop from the scratch, then spend time on Python 3.x. Don't spend time on Python 3 2.x. That is one thing. The second thing, and this statement you should remember always. This is the key one. Python 3.x is not backward compatible. When I'm talking about backward compatible, like 3.10, it is actually backward compatible with 3.7, 3.6, or whatever the previous versions of Python 3. But it is not compatible with Python 2.x. If you tell me Python 2.7 is there and with a 3.10, is it backward compatible with 2.x? The answer is straight no, because it is a completely two different things. It's two parallel lines. So there is no concept of inheritance or backward compatibility here. Okay. So now that is Python 3.x. So now that's all about the quick history of Python programming language and join the various implementations. Okay. Various implementation, for example, the initial implementation was being done using C Python. We do have J Python, that is actually Java for Java related frameworks. Okay. And we have Iron Python, that is for .NET related framework. And we do have PyPy, that is Python and Python. Python and Python is actually 100 times better as compared to any other Python implementations. As for Vandesham, if we want to execute anything, we should actually run faster, use PyPy. Okay, so now I have given very little. That is not the limited. Like I have just given not top five implementations of Python, but don't. That is not the complete list. There are actually hundreds of implementations being done. Even today, people are actually exploring many other Python implementations. And the most recent, I mean, PyPy is actually written in Python itself. So it is actually faster. And coming to another and objective of Python is completely different. Think about, you want to actually execute uptime command, and if you want to actually do a bash programming, how many lines you are actually going to execute? It is like vi, then the file name over there, let's say, for example, example.bash, and execute uptime. Just type uptime, enter, you are done, and then run the script, you will get the result. But in Python, can you do that way? No. You need to actually use either OS or system libraries or subprocess libraries, or we can say models, then import the models, then call the function, respective function, inside that function, pass your command. Then if you want output, again another two lines of code you need to actually write. So it is like whenever you're actually running it, you are dependent on models. Okay, so we should not actually compare Bash versus Python. Why? Because there are special cases where we need Bash, and Bash is actually faster than Python. But there are cases, let's say for example, you have a large amount of Excel and which you want to actually analyze, and certain amount of data you want to actually fetch from that particular Excel and send it an email to a user community, basically based on their business requirement. In that case, you can think about, can we do it using Bash? The answer is no. If you want to do it, then how do I read an Excel file? There is no such direct commands available in by default with the operating system, which can help me with reading the Excel content. The question is, can I read the Excel file in Python? Of course, yes. We do have libraries available. If you want faster, use NumPy, Pandas, and the other utilities or other modules or packages in Python, which is much faster and which can delete large amount of data that a cell cannot actually handle it. So that is why we are actually learning Python. The question is next, why we should actually learn another scripting language? If you're already familiar with Bash, we can actually manage the automation work or project work. Why another programming language? Guys, remember, even today, if you look at anyone, guys having 20 years of experience, 15 years of experience, 10 years of experience, they have a dream. Can I code in Python? Do you know Python in your interview process? Like definitely, the question will be coming. Do you know Python? If you know Python, what are things you have done? What are things you know? These are $1 million questions, right? So what you need to do is you should actually understand what we can actually do using Python. The first thing I'm just going to tell you, definitely the automation we can actually do. With the automation we can do, what we can do automation activities. And the second thing what we can do, we can develop web applications using Python, Django, Flask, and all these frameworks. We can actually implement API implementations using Fast API. We can do API implementation using Flask too. Okay, those are the frameworks available, and we can actually build desktop based applications. We can develop any business critical applications. We can implement artificial intelligence, machine learning, data analytics related project work. We can actually complete it using Python. And we can definitely do any application maintenance activities using Python. And if there is a real need of dealing with database scripts, or we have, let's say for example, someone is actually working in the order fallout. Order fallout means, let's say for example, that large amount of orders which needs to be reprocessed, and the data is actually stored in a MySQL database or a PostgreSQL or a Oracle database. How do you read the data, and then how do you call the API to republish the particular order, then reprocess the particular order? Those things we can actually do it using Python. So that is the reason why we are actually learning Python. Yes. Okay. So that's all about Python. Now, when I'm talking about any programming language, guys, let's say consider in this case, okay, let us don't consider Python. Any programming language, let's say for example C. When you started learning C for the very first time, what you have actually gone through, like to know the language basics. Can you guys, anyone actually tell me any programming language? Okay, forget about any programming language. Just let us talk about English. Okay, what are the character sets? What are the keywords we are actually using to build meaningful sentences? Definitely, when I'm talking about English, you look at any book, maybe a programming book, maybe some story related book, or maybe anything. Okay, it contains white spaces, yes, because those are the separators. It contains the new lines, and then we do have a sentence to end the sentence. We are actually placing a dot. In a paragraph, you are actually using comma, and in the alphabets, we are actually using alphabets like small case alphabets, capital case alphabets, and to represent the quantity, we are actually using digit or floating point numbers and using a percentage symbol. Those are the many things. Many now, for example, if you look at any English content, these are the character sets basically, right? Similarly, to to write program in Python, what are the things we do have? We do have certain keywords. What is keyword? What is keyword, guys? What is keyword? Anyone is having any idea? What is keyword? If is there, if is a keyword, else is a keyword, elif is a keyword, right? And then for is a keyword, while is a keyword. The print, I'll just come now, whether it is a keyword or a function, it is a function actually, Amadev. So now there are so many keywords are actually available. That is keywords. Then we do have actually identifiers to understand what is identifier in layman understanding. I'm just going to tell you in the real life, everyone is having a name. Like there was a Subbu and then Tanmay, Barsarani, Atis, Tapas. These are like names. Like, how did you get these names? Definitely our parents celebrated a naming ceremony and they have given, okay, Subbu will be identified. Nickname is Subbu. Good name is actually Subbu Samantha. It's a naming ceremony over. My name is finalized. I cannot actually change it. Similarly, in the identifier in a program, is nothing but I, you can give meaningful names to the variables, meaningful names to the program, meaningful names to the function. And once it is actually let's say for example, you have given company equals to Amazon, company is identifier. So in any programming, we do have keywords, we do have identifiers, we do have punctuations. Punctuations is like how do you separate the statements, like semicolon is there, comma is there, separating the values. We can use for a block we can actually use braces, or we can actually for a tuple we can actually use moon bracket or round brackets, and we'll go in detail, so don't worry about it. So in Python we do have a lot of keywords and then punctuators, and then we do have identifiers and many other things, tokens. So that using that we can actually able to write the code. Now Python for what? I have already told you what are the use cases. First of all, believe me, Python is actually very easy to learn and it is very much expressive. Why we are actually saying expressive? Let's say you want to kill print hello world, you just give print hello world. Okay, and let's say for example, there are actually many other scenarios. If you know English, half of the code you can actually understand. If you know the English words, English keywords, then you can definitely understand most of the programs, whatever is actually written right now. Maybe the complex program you'll actually struggle a lot to understand, but the medium program, simple programs, you'll be able to understand it. And it is an interpreted language. Interpreted languages are actually comparatively slow as compared to compiled languages. Okay, but Python is an interpreted language, so that is actually the one of the feature of the Python, that is known as interpreted language. And then we do have definitely anything we are actually using in today's market. First of all, we are actually looking whether it is free to use. Can I actually use it free? Any software you are actually downloading, let's just consider about any software. First of all, we are checking whether it is actually free to use. In technical terms, we call it actually open source. If it is open source and free to use, then definitely people will be using it because there is no cost associated. And we do have large set of standard libraries. When I'm talking about libraries, these are nothing but the modules or packages which we can actually reuse it. I mean, use it as per our requirement. For example, using pandas, we are not paying anything to the guys who has actually developed pandas. Similarly, NumPy, SkyPy, any other beautiful. So there are actually many other modules or packages available which we can actually use with Python. That is one of the use case why we are actually using Python. And definitely we can actually develop graphical user interfaces using Flask, Django, and all these frameworks. And I'm not going to cover about developing web applications or desktop applications in this session. Then it's easy to integrate. You can actually integrate Python programs in any other programming language. You can actually definitely invoke a Python script within Shell. In Shell, we can actually call Python, or in any languages. For example, Java program, you want to call a Python, or in Python program, you want to invoke a Java program, C++ program, we can actually do that. So easy for integration. And definitely one of the best feature of this scripting language, why it is rocking in the market, is actually object-oriented features. Okay, Python is actually object-oriented language. Okay, and then the memory allocations are actually dynamic. Let's say, for example, when I'm talking about memory allocations, Let me talk about like C. We do have like malloc, calloc, realloc, and all these functions for memory allocations. In Java, we do have like collections and like for dynamic memory allocation and deallocation. And in case of Python, it happens dynamically. Explicitly, we are not going to deal with the memory allocation and deallocation. Okay, I'll just tell you in details like when you are actually going through it. I'll just let you know like uh, how it works basically. Okay, so that's all about the very basics of Python. Now today I'm just going to start with one thing, guys. Input and output. Input and output. In layman understanding, can you tell me what is the input and what is output? Can anyone?
Maybe what are the input parameter we are passing through a program or script, then what are the output we are getting, whether it is a desired output or what. That is decided as input and output. Yeah.
Very nice. So now you are actually telling about like input means we need to actually pass input parameter. Think about, let's say for example, you are actually going to your ATM. As soon as you are punching your card, the next step what it is actually asking is enter your PIN. That is nothing but an input. I'm just giving like real-time example so that you can actually correlate and understand how it is working. Maybe ATM softwares, I don't know like whether they have actually used a BC++ code or a Java code or a .NET code or some other code. I don't know. But whenever we are actually passing the pin, it is getting validated. That is nothing but input. Now you are actually checking a balance inquiry. Okay, you punch your card, then you have actually given your pin, that is your input. If it is like a valid pin, you can see a lot of menus, cash withdrawal options, balance inquiry, then transfer options, and then many other things over there. Now, whenever you're actually going to check for the balance option or like press balance check, then what's happening? You are actually going to get a message saying your balance is so and so, right? The amount you can actually see in the screen. That is nothing but an output operation. The system is telling, hey, this is the output. So now, in case of input and output operation, let us first consider, because input is going to take bit time, like for you guys to understand. Maybe tomorrow we can actually more focus about input. I'll just see if time permits today we can actually go for input. But let us say like what is output operation. Output operation is actually to do any output operation. We can say Python, hey Python, go ahead print hello world. So hello world. Okay, so now what it is going to do is it is world. So the print here is actually for output operations. So now let's say I want to actually print something like this: print welcome to Python session. Welcome to Python session. Now I can give here like the print, let's say Tanmay, Subhasis, Devasis, and then I can say Shankar. Okay, so now this is nothing but we can actually use print statement. If I'm not mistaken, in Python 2, it was like print followed by you can actually specify the message over here. Okay, in Python 2, print was a statement. In Python 2, print was a statement, and in statement we do not specify like in a moon bracket. In Python 3.x, print is a function and you must specify like definitely the moon bracket. Now there is a chance of like now you are getting a requirement. Some script is actually written in Python 2.x. You want to migrate to Python 3.x. The first takeaway from here is all the messages needs to be quoted like this. I don't know if there are actually direct utilities available which can actually convert the script from Python 2.x to Python 3.x. If not, this is the first technical takeaway from this session, today's session. If there is a requirement of migrating Python 2 code to Python 3 code, as we are covering print statement, you have to actually enclose in moon brackets. Now, the next thing is I'm just talking about like print statement. Next is like where do I write this? Where do I write this? Do I need to write it on Windows? Should I run it on Linux? Like where to run this code? Where to run this code? You can definitely run it anywhere because Python is platform independent. You can write it once, execute it as per the requirement. Okay, Mac anywhere you want to execute, you can actually execute. When I'll just tell you the internal of the program, maybe sometime end of this, end of coming week, I'll just tell you the program execution sequence because right now if I'm going to tell you, it will be all story, okay, all theory only. Once you're actually familiar, you can actually correlate and understand in depth, like, what I'm actually taking program execution strategy and program execution sequences and all these things, you can actually understand little better. But for now, we can actually execute anywhere. So now to execute anywhere, how do I tell the system that run my program? If I write this and then how do I run it? So to tell the system, we should definitely include the dependencies. We should install, or we can say we can install the required dependencies before we are actually writing the Python code. First, what you can do directly, you can download Python 3.x from net and install it. Okay. The question is, how do I actually go ahead, check for Python training? Let's say, for example, I'm just going here, google.com, like download Python 3.x or 3.10. Okay. Now here you can see, guys, remember it is actually free to use. You can identify, like if any URLs are actually ending with org, they are not going to charge you anything, but there'll be agreement definitely, like what you are actually going to do, and then what are the limitations, whether it is actually free to use for commercial purposes and all. So those things you need to actually look at it. Okay. So now look at here. So I'm just Python 3.1. Okay. And in this Python 3, some people they call it as actually Python 3000 or Python 3K. Okay. So in that you are actually hearing Python 3K or Python 3 or Python 3.x. It's just the same. The most recent release is actually 3.10. Here you can see it was released, like I just mentioned, it was released Q4 of last year. The exact date is actually 4th of October 2021. Okay, this is the most recent version of Python 3.x. Now, if you want to actually download it, you can definitely go ahead, download from this page. That is one way, like not to download it. Here you can see the source is there, exe file is there, 64-bit embedded package is here. So you can actually download anything and then use it. Okay, that is one way. Then the second thing is, if you want to actually run it on a Linux platform, definitely you can actually do that. Guys, let me note it down over here. Once you're actually directly using Python 3.x, in this case Python 3.10, the default IDE is idle editor or IDE. IDE, what is the IDE stands for? Anyone wants to actually talk? Guys, as I mentioned, this is IDE stands for Integrated Development Environment. Let's say I'm new to programming. I may make some errors, syntax errors. And during the development time itself, the system should flag, hey, there is some error, correct it. Then like writing the 100 lines of code and then running it and then struggling like to identify whether the error is actually line number 2 or line number 5. I'm not able to actually understand what is the error is all about. So that is the reason why we are actually using IDs. Guys, remember why ID came into picture. I was still going through and blog to understand like why IDs are actually there. We are talking about automation. ID also is one of the automation. Let's say developers are actually spending good amount of time, we are actually using good amount of time in the coding. Okay, we are using good amount of time in the coding. If some person is actually writing the code, or I am writing the code throughout the year, Not using IDE, I'll end up using end up with hundreds or thousands of syntax related errors. If I'm using IDs, then it will flag. Let's say, for example, I'm using PyCharm. You just type print, then most of the things it will be auto-filled. Autofill means just type part of the string, hit enter, then automatically it will be just writing the print function itself with all the syntax. This is the default one. The next one is, should I go ahead with the default one? Even engineering students, PU students, they are using ideal editor. Guys, remember, these are not commercial purpose IDE. What we use it, we have atomic, we do a visual code. Visual code is there, and then visual code is actually free, and you can actually use it, but you have to actually use the add-ons. And then we do have atomic, we do have Jupyter notebook, we do have PyCharm, and many other things. Okay, Jupyter notebook, also you can actually use it. They say, and it has in Jupyter notebook, Jupyter CLI is there. We can use it in the CLI, and we can also definitely use a web-based framework where we can practice, record everything, and replay everything as per our requirement. But whenever you are actually doing real-time automations or real-time projects, you need some standard editors like standard editors or IDE. You can use Eclipse. Eclipse is actually mostly used for Java, but we do have plugins to support for Python code too. Eclipse with a Python plugin, you can use Eclipse. You can definitely use PyCharm, which is very commonly used. Like if someone is actually doing web development and all these things, now PyCharm has a lot of features. When I initially used PyCharm, I was actually struggling to get the grip. When I have actually started using PyCharm for some time, then I really liked it. That is now we can use PyCharm. If you love Unix like me, whenever I do write my code, I just prefer VI editor. But when I started using PyCharm, right now what I'm doing is I'm just writing the code in PyCharm because it's very easy. But in Unix VI editor without any plugins, you'll end up writing everything. Let's say, for example, this simple statement like print hello world, I'll be writing everything, each and everything, and it is not going to autofill. If I am just giving a PRI, it is not going to autofill. But in Python, if I give a PyCharm, PRIN, hit enter, then automatically the first suggestion is print, and it is actually going to come as no print autofill. I'll just tell you in some time. And we can actually use any IDE. There is no restriction. As long as you are able to run the code, I am happy. In this learning phase, do not actually debate which editor is actually better, which one is actually most commonly used and all. Use anyone as per your requirement. And I'm using no PyCharm. I'm familiar with Jupyter Lab and Jupyter Notebook. I'm also familiar with the VI editor, VI or VIM. But if you're using VI or VIM, definitely you need to install the Python 3.x version. By default, you can see in the Red Hat 8, Red Hat 9, I'm not sure, Red Hat 9 came in this April, I believe they have released Red Hat 9. In Red Hat 8, it was 3.7.x, okay? And because it was released, Red Hat 8 was released sometime in 2020 timeframe, okay? And Red Hat 9 came just in 2022 April timeframe. So that's the reason. Maybe in 9 it is 3.10, but in 8 it is 3.7 by default, and you 7.x by default. If you want to actually use 3.10 explicitly, you need to install it. Okay, and then you can use any editors like Emac, VI, VIM, any editor to write the program. The question is how to install PyCharm. You can here go to google.com, and here you can say download PyCharm, and here you can go and click on PyCharm, and you can see it here, guys. This is interesting. I was actually talking about web framework and all these things. Don't go for professional. It is not free. You can go for community edition. And this JetBrains, they are actually into many other software development activities as well, and a lot of softwares are actually freely available, and a lot of softwares they are actually charging to the organizations. And here you can see Windows is there, and it's also in Linux also we do have PyCharm community edition too. We can use PyCharm in the Linux machines as well. Let's say for example you are actually using a Ubuntu desktop, or you are actually using any development desktop, Amazon Linux or Oracle Linux, anything, you can actually download the Linux package and then install it. Now, if you go for Windows edition, for example, and going for community page and download, you can actually go ahead, download it, and here it will get downloaded. Okay, and then you can also see the different features. Also, there is a comparison between. There's a direct link in the. I was about to show you that. Okay, anyway, that's fine out of the context. So there is a link which says what is the difference between the professional edition versus the community edition. But community edition is actually more than sufficient for our purpose, like what we are actually exploring at this moment. So now let me tell you one thing. As soon as you are actually done with the PyCharm installation, here you can see a PyCharm edition. Here you can see 2022.2. So this is the latest version what I have actually installed. I think sometime last year. I don't remember it. I have upgraded in between. So here I can actually go for PyCharm. So once you're actually using PyCharm 2022, you can see many other things over here. So don't worry about this. So now you can see there are many programs over here. So don't worry about it. Okay, so here we go, and you can do file, one moment, file, new project, and you can specify a path where you want to actually create it. Okay, and give any location, then click on create. Okay, I've already created multiple projects. I don't want to actually disturb anything, so let me close this out. Okay, now once the project is set, like here you can see Python project. In my case, I have just given C Python project. Okay, and if I want to actually create one more project, I can actually create it. It's not like I can create only one project. I can create many projects as per my requirement. Okay, so this is how it is actually going to look like. Let me create one project. Okay, file, new project, go here and then click on adding any interpreters over there. Like there is option and the steps. So now that's done. Like now we can actually create here and create from existing sources or open project. Directory is not empty. Create from, okay, let me, because the directory is not empty, it means that now I have something over there. Maybe I can create, okay, new folder, Python training. Okay, in the C drive, I've created a Python training folder, and then going to PyCharm. Now file, new project. Here I'm just giving Python underscore training, and then here I'm just giving okay, let it be Python only. Now create this window. And I'll tell you how it is going to work in the Linux environment too. So don't worry about it. So Python training is here. So now my Python training, I can actually go ahead, create a new, here I can select Python file. Here I'm just giving hello world. Python file, you can see unit test and all these things. We'll just go later. I mean, later point of time, I'll just cover in details. But as of now, if you're actually going to use Python, you can actually use Python hello world. You can write here hello world and click on Python file, then done. And let me write the same program, print. Look at here. I've just typed print. Automatically, it is actually autofilling. That is the benefits of using IDE. I just hit enter, it's done. If I'm just writing one single quotes or double quotes, it is automatically adding one more double quotes over there. Like hello world. Okay. So now look at here. My code is done, only one line, and this is hello world. To run this one, you can directly run this program. Click here run, You can click here run. You can see like shift F10 is run the main. Main is like whenever you're actually creating the program, I'll just tell you the structure. Maybe after the second week or third week, I can tell you the structure like when I'm covering like the modules and all, like what is a project, what is a module, what is a package, and all these things, what is main.py and all these things. But for the time being, if you go for like run, it is by default going to run the main. If you want to actually run the current program, it is like control shift F10. If you're actually using PyCharm, wants to run the current program, use control shift F10. Okay. Now, if I'm executing hello world, control shift F10, if I'm executing, here you can see this is hello world. Guys, remember the output we are actually getting is like this. What is the output of our hello world program? It says like C, Python training, Python scripts, Python.exe. Okay, so this is the project. This is a virtual environment which is created right now. Just a while ago, we have created Python training, and under Python training, we have actually selected a folder like Python. In Python, we do have like the Python executable file that is python.exe, and our program path is Python training hello world.py. In hello.world.py, we have just given like hello world, so that's the reason we are actually getting the output like this. Now, if my requirement is I want to actually write few more lines like this. Let's say hello, like welcome to session, welcome to Python session, or here I can say my name is Subbu. My name is Subbu. Then done. Now control shift F10 if I do, I can actually get the output as like 3 lines. Now the question is, if I'm missing, let's say for example, I have actually, the suggestion is actually here, but I'm not actually using like now any print or anything. What I've done is like now I have seen a code in Python 2.x, and here I'm just executing hello, let me try this. Okay, now if you are actually using a editor, already it is flagging there is something wrong, and here you can see there is a error. What is that error? Highlight all the problems. You can say like no syntax, all problems, or anything. You can actually see it is saying like no one error, one warning, one typo, and it is there. Like now here you can see all the details. If you want to see, just click here. You can see what kind of error. Let's say for example, syntax related error. End statement is expected. Some error is actually there. If you want to actually expand it, we can actually do that at a later point of time. I'm just going to tell you that. But if you're actually running the program, control shift F10, what the Python is actually trying to say, see here guys, if you're using a Python 2.x print statement here it's saying print hello, let me try this, syntax error, missing parenthesis in call print. Did you mean print? This is what is artificial intelligence. Like the program is smarter than us. It is suggesting you have used print. Where you have actually used print? Exactly here you can see line number 4. Here also you can see it is a line number 4. It is saying in your program hello dot, this is my file, the C program Python training hello world.py, line number 4 there is some issue. What is the issue all about? This is your line number 4. What kind of error? That is a syntax error. What is missing? A parenthesis is missing in the print function call. Did you mean print function? Yes. So that is where the fix is. If you understand this, you can actually go ahead, put together the bracket here. Then that is the solution over here. Okay. So that's all about like how the print is actually working. Now print has like various syntaxes we can actually use in print. Let's say for example, I have like the print statement something like this, like print. I'm just giving here hello again world. Okay, now let us run this. Control Shift F10. I just use a comma over here. This comma is a separator, string separator. So this comma here is a string separator. String separator. Okay, and this will not be part of your output. Let's say, for example, if my program is this, control A, then this one, this is the program. In the output, you are not going to get command. Okay, because it's a separator. I'm just separating like print hello, print world. And what is the default separator? The default separator is space. Okay, now when I'm actually executing, let's say for example, I'm just executing print hello, comma, how are you? Okay, if I'm executing this in this case, you can see the output will be hello, how are you? And separators will be like in a space over here. Okay, now separators will be space over here. Now let me execute this. Okay, now here we go, control shift F10. You can see like hello, how are you? Okay, now in print we can have many other things. Okay, let's say for example, I've just given hello, how are you? Here I'm just telling my separator is not space. My separator is actually asterisk marks, like 5 times. Can you actually execute this? You're telling the system, can you do this? System is saying, okay, fine, this is what you wanted. So here is your output. Now, let's say, for example, you are actually telling like now print statement, I want something like this. Let's say for your understanding, I'm just giving like Python, DevOps, and AWS. Python, DevOps, and AWS. Here I'm just giving a separator as I have decided to use a separator something different, that is like double pipeline. Now Control Shift F10 if you do, here you can see it is like Python, DevOps, AWS. Now let's say you want to generate a CSV file. The output should be in the CSV file. What you can do here is use the separator as comma. Okay, Control Shift F10. Now here you can see Python, AWS, and DevOps. And if you want to execute the separator, and here you can say my separator is nothing, don't give any separator. Now Control Shift F10. This is how it is actually going to work. Now guys, remember, like look at the output. The first one was actually hello world, print hello world. That was only one string, hello world. Okay, there are many other printf statements, and I'll not able to cover like now everything today. We'll continue with like now input and output operation starting tomorrow too. So now look at here, the first line is actually hello world. The second line here, it is the separator, and the default separator string separator is comma. Comma is the string separator here, comma is string separator here. Okay, and then here also the comma is string separator. Then here we are actually using multiple asterisk marks as separator. Here we are using double pipeline as separator. Here we are using comma as separator. Here we are actually not giving anything as separator. So this is how the separator is actually going to work. Okay, so this is SCP, stands for SCP. So far what I have actually told you technical, like the takeaways from today's program is print is a function, and the syntax of the print is, just hold on, the syntax of print is print followed by like string, anything you can actually, or your input you can specify here, input or string or anything. Okay, and then another type of print statement I have told you, print input your string. Here your string I can specify here like input, whatever is input or string, and then we are actually using separator, and separator equals to, here we are actually specifying our separator, your separator. Okay, so these are the two things what I have actually covered so far. And guys, if you are actually feel free to use any IDs, ask me questions. I can actually help you with Jupyter Lab. I can help you with the Visual Code, and then I can actually help you with PyCharm. I can help you with the installation of Python 3.10 or 3.10 like 7 or anything. But if you are actually having Python 3.7 also, most of the things are actually going to work as is. So nothing. Recommend you to install Anaconda. Anaconda is a distribution which has like a lot of details like Python 3.x, it has R and other system libraries too. So if you are actually using Anaconda installer, then most of the things will be actually installed as part of that. Okay, so you can actually go ahead, Anaconda for here you can see Google download Anaconda Anaconda for Windows or Mac or Windows 10, Python 3.7 or 3.10, whatever it is. So docs.anaconda.com, and here you can click here, and then you can actually download the respective packages. Okay, and I do have steps, straightforward steps for Linux installations. If you need it, just let me know, or else PyCharm is actually more than enough, very easy and very easy to get started, and it doesn't need any admin privileges to if you want to actually install in a company laptop or desktop, anything you're actually using, then definitely look at your approved list of softwares in your organization. If they do not allow PyCharm, don't use it. If they allow PyCharm community editions, then start using it. Okay. So with this, we are actually done with the